recording. Great, we are recording. So even the opportunity to do these spontaneous webinars, I think is a huge gift. I think we're seeing all over the internet experts in their respective disciplines offering a lot of information and a lot of wisdom for free. And I think that that's an incredible unfolding, an incredible happening. So the idea behind today's chat is to talk about sound and its practical applications. And what we'd like to accomplish today is to give you a toolkit so that you can refer to it during these difficult times. I want to start by saying that Kulreet came to America basically for her book tour. That was the original idea. And
look at those notes, Sonya.
Look at these notes. Look at that.
That's an impressive.
This is what we're talking about today. We're talking about sound medicine.
Oh, now I'm nervous. Now I know you're going to quiz me.
I'm not. I promise.
You're going to ask me which page did I write.
Right. How to use the ancient science of sound to heal the body and mind. So this is Kulreet's second book, everyone. Is that right, Kulreet? I think it's your second.
Correct.
So the first book is called The Prime. Look what I have here. Okay. So The Prime is literally about priming your body for successful weight loss by removing toxins and fixing your gut. And it was especially appealing to me because Kulreet promised to help us all lose weight without exerting willpower. And I absolutely loved that idea. Spontaneous weight loss. So Kulreet, I'm holding you to this. Without going into every detail of your bio, because everyone can look up Kulreet's website for that. And I'm happy to put that in the chat box for anyone who's interested. But Kulreet is an acclaimed neurologist and an expert in Ayurveda. And she's currently the head of the Sri Narayani Holistic Center in Pita, India. And judging by this book, maybe soon a master of Siddha medicine.
So let's redefine what soon means.
Yeah. So let's jump in and talk about sound medicine. The book is available on Amazon.com. It's really wonderful for so many reasons. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Kulreet. As I said to you earlier, what amazed me was, in many ways, it felt like one book, but out of this book can come 10 books. And I loved how you wove your personal story in and your journey into this book, and you mixed it with solid science and mantra meditation and even a chapter on the ever mysterious and ever present Citiz. So there's a lot to talk about here, and I know we can't get to all of it, but we'll do our best to get through as much as we can. And maybe for another session, we will do a special session on the Citiz, which I think would be really outstanding. So with that, Kulreet, welcome.
Thank you.
And maybe we can start a little bit with your personal journey and maybe a little bit about Sri Shakti Amma.
Oh, I would love to. I had mentioned even in my first book some personal information about my relationship to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and how my mom had introduced me into Ayurvedic medicine. And the feedback that I had gotten about sharing that personal story was how important it was for people to actually feel, the person behind the words. And in writing this book, I had been given the same advice, both from Amma as well as a Siddha master who we were fortunate enough to have been introduced to. And he said the same thing, that it's really important that you ground this in your own experience. And his exact words were, talk like a human being. Do not make this something that is very esoteric, that people feel is unreachable. And I think that's such an important aspect of the sharing here, in addition to sharing, what we are learning as we're going through the Siddha texts, in Pidam. Also just sharing that a normal human being, I guess if I can claim to be normal, at least somebody who had, I think, a lot of similar experiences to the majority of people in America, that these experiences in this world is not unreachable, even if you're very much grounded in that practical world where, you're paying your taxes, you're saving for retirement. And my entire journey with Amma, who is my, spiritual teacher, whom I met about a little over a decade ago, my entire story with Amma has been really embracing the 200% of life, embracing the area of spiritual development, but also embracing the areas of professional development, personal development, family development, and that just like mantras are not for those that are sitting in caves, in remote places somewhere contemplating the meaning of life, that they're meant as much for us, people who are looking at what's next step in my career? How can I bring my family closer? How can I have a more positive impact on my community? How can I control this monkey brain? That it's meant for the rest of us.
Right.
And that's really been a critical part of these last 10 years, is taking the most beautiful parts of spiritual teachings and interweaving them into my needs as a mom, my needs as a physician, my needs as somebody who is now across 2 different countries. How do you juggle all of that? And how can what we're learning from the Siddha records help somebody just better manage their life?
Well, I think that's beautifully put, and it's actually a wonderful segue into a question that I imagine you receive quite a bit, which is, how do you straddle the East and West? Right? So you're an expert in Ayurvedic and now Siddha medicine, but you're also really very much grounded in Western medicine. And how do they work together? In the book, you talk a little bit about bridging this gap in terms of approaches to sound medicine specifically. So how can we do that?
Well, I've been really fortunate in that my life, the narrative of my life has been written in a way that I had to bridge, the two. I was born in India, then raised in America, and then in America learned mantra meditation. Never, in my family were they really exposed to that when they were in India. And then in America learned about Ayurvedic medicine, and then my training as a neurologist being in America, but then choosing a field that's so poorly responsive to medications and so extremely responsive to lifestyle changes. I've had all of these underpinnings, in my life that kind of allowed for the coming together of the two. And I think the greatest gift of that is I look at both traditions now, literally living, both in America and India. I look at both traditions and just go, wow, is this amazing what we can get from India? But boy, could India really, use some help in some of these Western themed ideas. And the same for America of, wow. And, I have to say, being in India and coming back to America, I'm really seeing America with new eyes and with new appreciation in terms of our degree of creativity, our ingenuity, how organized we are. But like, wow, what an amazingly accomplished country. But what can we do if we embedded some of these ancient principles? And so I think whenever you come from a place of open-mindedness and appreciation that both of these traditions have something to offer, which I feel that people who are in the integrative world, sometimes just say it's only integrative and the Western medicine has nothing to offer, and vice versa. That when you are open to really understanding the contribution that a culture has to make, you automatically create a bridge through your gratitude
Mm.
for what they, for what they're already offering to the world.
Oh, it's beautiful. So you mentioned some of these ancient principles. Let's talk a little bit about those. So we're talking about sound. So what are the ancient views on sound?
So, what's interesting to me, Sonia, is, even though I've been doing mantra meditation since I was 9 years old, it wasn't until I moved to India and started working, at the center and working with Amma on the Siddha records that I first really began to understand what sound is.
Hmm.
And ever since I was really young, I was not only exposed to the world of mantra meditation, but also to the world of quantum physics, because that was something that my mom was very drawn to. But they never came together until I started diving, slowly starting to dive into this world, because the Siddhas were truly quantum biologists, meaning
Hmm.
they understood our biology and nature on a quantum level. And so this ancient view of sound from the Siddha masters, I could never have understood had I not been exposed to quantum physics.
Hmm.
Because although they are writing in an extremely poetic way, they are by no means using metaphors. And I think that's one of the big misunderstandings within the Indian community, is that there's a misconception that although what they're writing is very beautiful, it's not metaphoric, it's actually literal. And
Well,
so how do they see the world? What do they perceive as sound? Although we tend to look at sound as what we can hear, that's a very, very limited range of frequencies. If you consider sound only what the human ear can hear, then you disregard all of the other frequencies that other animals pick up, like what dogs pick up. And so the truth is that sound is actually this sea of vibrations that we are stewing in, we're soaking in them. And that's the same conclusion, really, that, quantum physicists have come to, is that we are living in a sea of vibrations, and some of which, when they're perceived by the ear, we can call that sound. But these vibrations are actually the basis for the manifestation of everything that we see and we experience. And so what these masters saw was exactly that, and they experienced it on a quantum level. They wrote about it. They wrote about the atom and the subatomic particles over 8,000 years ago, which is absolutely stunning to me.
mind-boggling.
And they had a direct experience with these vibrations. And so what they saw were certain vibrations had certain impact, and that there was literally a material, which we're now referring to in quantum physics as a 0 point field. In ancient India, they referred to it as Akash. In ancient European traditions, they called it ether. That this subtle material actually holds these vibrations, and that when you understand and when you can interpret the vibrations that bring about all of the positive qualities, meaning bring about healing in the body, bring about clarity in the mind, that when you perceive those, they translated those vibrations into what we now know as mantras,
Mm.
that was the verbal, the audible translation of those vibrations. And that when you utilize those, because we are surrounded in this field called either ether or Akash or the 0 point field, you're literally able to have an effect everywhere by tapping into sound. And so they were masters at this. They were masters literally at manifesting reality through sound, because they understood this fundamental reality about life.
And who, just for everyone who are not familiar with the Siddhas, who are these amazing masters? How can we describe them?
Oh gosh, and this is why we're going to have to do a separate
Yes,
webinar
yes.
on the Siddhas. I have my own view of them, and I have, really kind of come to have just this full-on love affair with this tradition, because I was never expecting them to be so intellectually advanced. And I am somebody that, unlike for those of you who know my husband Joshua, he is just a fully heart-centered person, that he just goes around and he just feels love everywhere, and he really communicates from the heart. And that's his experience of nature is through the heart. And I'm somebody that if you can explain to me intellectually the majesty of nature or of science or of biology, you essentially just open up my heart, to just the profound beauty of life. And so I have always kind of accessed, beauty and truth through my mind. And so the siddhas to me, because I kind of approach life in that way, siddhas to me are just, they're the most profoundly intelligent, most profoundly insightful scientists. In one regard, they are scientists.
Sure.
Who were not separated from that energy that we call the divine, which they called just, that was the beingness, that was the unity of life, that was the underpinning consciousness of life. And they had that experience not in temples, but just immediately with the trees and nature. And their experience with it was not just on an external gross level, but they were peering into the actual laws that govern the universe. And they were doing this 8,000 years ago.
Wow.
And so all of the secrets, to longevity, the secrets to health, they understood them from the inside out. So, it's so hard for me to explain who the siddhas are in such a brief amount of time. We will definitely take up this topic because
definitely
they're a group that has had a global impact. But they only are known when they want to be known. And this seems to be a time in history where they are bringing back out, their knowledge.
Right. And people are becoming more and more aware of these ancient sages, of these.
I did an interview for Goop Fellas, and I loved the question from one of the interviewers. He said, and tell me more about these siddhas and how you become one,
Right.
And I love that question because I love that, somebody in LA was so excited about them and I was like, ask me that again in 10 years and maybe I'll have a little bit more to share with you.
Well, it's wonderful to be on this journey for all of us to see whether we can inch a little closer, right? Inch a little closer towards those siddha masters. So let's return then to sound. Let's just return to sound and talk about how can sound improve our life?
Well, sound is, first of all, you have to understand that we're built for sound. Okay, we are biologically engineered to have a chemical response to sound.
Right.
And we know this. There's nothing actually shocking about this. If this wasn't the case, there would be no such thing as soundtracks for Hollywood. I always say, like, if you want to understand biology, look at what Hollywood's doing, because they have the money to really look at how do you create a response from the audience. And what is one of the areas that Hollywood spends so much time and effort on money? It's the soundtrack, right?
Right.
Why is the soundtrack so important? If you take a soundtrack out of a movie, you will not have the same kind of emotional response to it. And for those that work out regularly, almost everybody brings something to listen to when they're at the gym because they know that they work out harder. I just did an interview recently with Jillian Michaels, and she said if she does not have her soundtrack when she goes to the gym, she turns around and goes back home because she knows she's not going to have as good of a workout. So we're actually designed, we're engineered to respond to sound. And we're starting to find that.
I interject for a second, because you mentioned in your book, which I love just to even think about this, how we are designed to be so sensitive to sound, and that in utero we have the ability to hear very early on in the process of development, that it's one of the earliest senses to develop.
It's one of the earliest senses to develop, and it's one of the last senses to leave. It is the way in which we connect to the world, because it's such a fundamental aspect of life, is frequency. And even on our cells, we have a structure called a primary cilia, which responds to sound, which responds to vibration. It actually changes the shape of the cell in response to vibration. Now, anybody though who walks into a room and has, you know, somebody screaming profanity at them, or somebody who's greeting them with loving words, can tell you that there's a different response in your body when you're exposed to one set of frequencies versus another, right? And it's immediate. It's not something that, you know, you go, oh, wait for it, the reaction's going to come. It's literally, as you hear the words, you're having a full reaction in the body, because we're genetically engineered to respond to sound. So it's not a question of, do we respond to sound? The question is, now that we understand that we respond to sound, how do we want to use sound? You know, how do we want to use sound
Exactly.
to improve the mind, to improve the body? And even in modern medicine, we do use inaudible frequencies in the form of ultrasound, in the form of lithotripsy, and there's even newer ultrasound technologies that are using sound to break up tumors. So we are using all these sound waves in modern medicine, but they're inaudible frequencies. That's such a small part of what the human brain and the human body is designed to respond to. So now what happens when you respond, or when you're exposed to audible frequencies that are designed to have a positive effect? And, you know, this is something that we have heard in the discourses in India, you know, when Amma says that as soon as you chant a mantra, you have every single cell in your body responding to it. And it's amazing to me to go back and look at those lectures, because they seem so simple, but the science behind it is so complex and it's so beautiful. And that's exactly what happens every single time you chant a mantra or you're meditating on a mantra. Every single cell of your body is reverberating with the resonance of that particular mantra.
So this is a perfect moment to ask you to tell us, what is a mantra?
A mantra is a sound that comes from nature that has the potential to actually help the human being transcend the mind. Okay, so mantra actually means, man means mind and tra means through. Now, when I showed the diagram at the center explaining the human biofield, you know, I show where the mental sheath is, and even beyond that, what we call the wisdom sheath, which is oftentimes associated with the heart. So you can say mantra is really to go through the heart and the mind and the heart. A mantra is something that takes you back to your primal resonance. Okay. So a mantra is a resonant frequency. So there's different frequencies that do different things. Like the frequency of ultrasound has a very specific purpose to it, right? And the frequencies of like love songs, for example, have a very specific frequency purpose to it. So a mantra has the frequency to tune you back to your primal source. And, you know, if you ask, well, why is that so important to have a resonant frequency that you're using on a daily basis to entrain the brain and to activate every cell of your body back to your primal resonant frequency? Well, because there is an absolute untapped amount of energy when you start to touch that field. And, you know, that field had a name to it in the Vedic and the Siddha tradition. It was called the Anandamaya Kosha, and that means the bliss field. Because when you start to touch that field, people actually feel bliss. And that's the bliss that people feel when they're meditating or when they're in a group that is chanting and you feel uplifted. You're beginning to touch that field. And that field is where the Siddhas essentially accessed all of their knowledge and all of their, you know, the powers, which were referred to as siddhis. That this field, just as quantum biologists and quantum physicists are describing as a 0-point field, has an infinite amount of energy. Infinite amount of energy. It's hard to even calculate. So if anybody feels that they're lacking energy or creativity, this is the field that you want to be touching on a daily basis, because
Right.
this is where all the brilliant ideas come from. You know, this is where all the expansiveness of life and understanding, and it's also where your body receives energy, you know, so it has a healing capacity as well.
I love that. I think that is so empowering. And, you know, part of why we wanted to talk today is to help people create a type of toolkit, right? So we want steps. How do we create a toolkit to relieve some of the anxiety, some of the fear, some of the stress that, you know, the world is feeling, especially at this particular moment amidst, you know, a very debilitating and mysterious pandemic. So you spoke a little bit about the benefits of chanting and the benefits of mantra, but maybe we can expand on that a little bit, and talk about this toolkit. What steps can we take? What can we learn?
So first of all, we have already so much research on mantra meditation. So it's not something that we're not at a place in history where we have to question, is this legitimate science or not? We've already done too much research on it. We're just in that time lag between when research gets done versus when doctors actually get trained, which is oftentimes a 20 to 30-year time lag. So we already know that mantras have an unbelievably positive impact on the mind, on the body, on conditions like anxiety, depression, PTSD, on conditions like heart disease, blood pressure. We already know that. So we can lay that aside and say, we don't need to prove that. That already has been proven. I talk about a lot of those studies in the book. So the next question becomes, how do you start? And the last chapter of my book is predominantly focused on this. But I think, Sonya, there's a huge misunderstanding about mantra meditation, that you have to be a yogi first, you know, that you have to be spiritual first before you can start it, that you have to have all these good habits first. And it's the exact opposite. No, it's the exact opposite. You know, if you already were all of that, you would no longer need a mantra practice. Those are all of the outcomes of having a mantra practice. You know, that's the after picture. And so, you know, who is a candidate for mantra practice? Basically anybody who's struggling in any area of their life. And, you know, it doesn't have to be something fancy. I always just say, first, just choose a space. And ideally, it would be the same place, you know, in your home, somewhere quiet and comfortable, and someplace that you can, like, put a do not disturb sign, and people will respect that. But, you know, how many times have I done my meditation in a car, in a plane, in my office, driving, you know, while I'm traveling somewhere? So it's not like I can only do a mantra practice if I have a perfect space. And then, you know, all you really need is a chair or some cushions, someplace to sit. But if you want, and this is not necessary, if you want to start to bring in some of the other senses, you can, you know, light a little bit of incense or have some essential oils, just so that your brain starts to associate that space with other senses of, oh, I'm getting ready for a mantra practice. Just like professional athletes, as soon as they put on their clothes, their brain starts to respond that, oh, I'm about to do exercise because I'm putting on my clothes that I work out in, or I'm putting on my tennis shoes. You can have a candle. And what's wonderful, because a huge part of mantra practice that really activates it is the feeling of love, is the feeling of devotion. And I talk a lot about this in the book, about the connection between the heart and the mind, and how the heart is actually capable of regulating the mind through electromagnetic fields and through biochemistry. So when you bring your heart into your mantra practice, it makes a tremendous difference. And so some people will use, you know, some kind of a picture that stimulates that sense of devotion, but all of those are just extras. All you really need is a place to sit down and a mantra.
Love that. There's a quote that I just wanted to read from the "Space is Not Empty" section of your book, and to your point, and it says, chanting a mantra is a deliberate act with a specific prescribed intention for outcome. The thoughts in our minds, according to Vedic philosophy, are also sound. And therefore, if you are able to have thoughts with intention, you are communicating your desires and manifesting your life more directly into the vibratory substance of the universe from which all matter arises.
It sounds so good when you read it, Sonya.
I love that quote because, again, I find it so empowering, right? And it really makes us aware of how powerful we are and how our
Yeah.
thoughts are powerful, that every thought is a mantra, so to speak.
No, you're
So
absolutely right.
I thought that was really brilliant. And in fact, speaking of toolkits, Sri Shakti Amma gave the world a very specific mantra for dispelling disease and vanquishing the coronavirus. I wonder if you can talk about that, because I think that that's a really important mantra to share with the world right now.
Absolutely. So mantras, just to step back, mantras were used in many different areas of life in Vedic times and by the Siddhas. They were used as part of agriculture. They were used as part of wedding ceremonies. And so the fact that they were used in the medical system isn't astonishing, because they were simply a part of life, every aspect of life. And even today, so many people in the self-help arena talk about the power of your mind, the power of your thoughts, but they're not giving tools necessarily to overcome those thoughts. And that's what a mantra is. It's a tool that actually transcends the mind's chatter. And so one of the ways in which disease and any kind of situation that was a threat to a population, like a pandemic, one of the ways that they fought that off is through mantras. And so when the coronavirus came out in China, we were given a mantra to use at the center and throughout the world, as you know, by Amma. And we started to chant that regularly at the center, and it's the Kali mantra. So for those that are unfamiliar, Kali is a form, again, now we're talking about energies in nature. So they're not specific to religion. It's just that different groups have described them and have given them different names, but they are by no means specific to this particular region or this particular religion, because they're too fundamental of a energy to be sequestered to just one kind of religious group. So Kali, from a vibrational standpoint, represents that power of the divine mother, or divine, the mother earth, you could say, that everything that represents feminine and creative energy that is protective in nature. So the mantra is a mantra to Kali, and we'll go through it. It's Om Cream, and Cream is the Bija mantra, and the Bija mantra is the seed. It's the sound that is the most basic reverberation of that particular energy. So Om Cream, Mahakali, Sarvarogam, and Sarvaroga means all negativity, all diseases. Nasi, Nasi, go away, go away. So it's a very, very powerful mantra to be used for any time of protection, but particularly for a time where we're trying to protect our communities, our families, our entire planet right now from a negative influence. So you
Just
can do
put it
it.
in the chat box for everyone who wants to reference it, so you have it available to you.
And I've made a video, and we'll tag this also on my Facebook account, and we'll have it written there as well. We'll make sure that everybody has the opportunity to see it written out. But you can say this out loud, and then eventually, as you become more comfortable with it, you can just meditate on it internally. But the way that it sounds is Om Cream Mahakali Sarvarogam Nasi Nasi. And we now have groups, which you already know, Sonya, we have groups that are chanting this together around the world, irrespective of religion, race, culture. They're chanting this together at particular times, 10 a.m. in their particular time zones. So we'll provide a link for that also, so that if anybody wants to join, just to feel connected and to help create that positive and protective energy in their own house or their work, they have a group that will support their practice.
I think that's great. And I think the more that we spread this information, we'll post it on all of our own social medias, but let's spread the word and have the world chanting.
And I think this is something that you talked about, having this toolkit, and I don't look at it as you can go outside and eat pizza every night and lick everybody you meet and be like, oh, I'm not going to get the coronavirus, or I'm not going to ever get sick because I'm chanting the mantra. I think it's one of the many things that you can do to make sure that you're taking the best care of your body. So like next week, we're going to have an entire episode on how to improve your immunity. So in addition to doing all of those things, why would we not use sound as a form of medicine when we know, even from a quantum level, that is ultimately what we are? We are reverberations. We are vibrational beings. Why would we not use vibrational medicine as one of the many things we do to stay healthy?
Beautiful. So I think now's a good time to open it up for a few questions. What do you think, Kulreet?
I think that's.
Are you ready for a few questions?
Are you saying we have run out of things to say? So.
No, we can go on, but I'm conscious that I think people have what to ask. So let's see what some of the questions are. One question that I received, and if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. One question is, does Kulreet see meditation and mantra as equally powerful?
So this is a really great question. So there's different forms of meditation. Mantra meditation is a form of meditation. So there's forms of meditation where you are focused on your breath. There's forms of meditation where you're just doing visualization. There's very, very, very advanced forms of meditation that don't use mantra, but for the majority of us, mantra meditation is the easiest meditation. Some of these meditation forms are really, really challenging to do that don't use mantra, and it's something that you may eventually work up to. But just to kind of start out using sound, because we are built to respond to sound, it's one of the fastest and easiest ways to just simply calm the mind down. So chanting is when we're verbalizing it, out loud, and that's a great way to begin. But ultimately, doing the same mantra silently is said to be more powerful. Now, let me back up though, because I think there's tremendous value that when you are in a group setting, when people are creating that resonant frequency, when you are chanting together, I think that's extremely, extremely powerful as well. So I'm saying, in the absence of those opportunities, when you're alone, that, having the recitation of the mantra in the mind is a very, very easy and powerful meditation tool.
Super. Another question we received is, what do you think of Russell Paul's book, The Yoga of Sound? Is that something that you're familiar with?
It's not something I'm familiar with, and I'm really sad that I'm not familiar with it, because I'm, of course, now an avid fan of learning more and more information about sound medicine. So I can't comment on it because I'm unfamiliar with it, but I feel it's probably my loss that I missed a book out there that was written about the.
Well, I think now we definitely have the time.
Yes, now we have the time.
We have the time. I think that's also part of this unusual time historically, is that many of us do have the opportunity to go within and to deepen our practice. So for those of us who are really curious about mantra and chanting, now is an incredibly opportune time to start or to deepen.
And I do write about in the book, there's an entire area within yoga called Nada Yoga, which is the yoga of sound. And it essentially is talking about how in ancient times, those that were Nada yogis, so essentially those that were found unity with sound or unity with a mantra, what they were able to do with their voices when they chanted. And I certainly look at, Joshua as following. Joshua's my husband, who does the sound baths at our center, and he uses both ancient Sanskrit and Tamil mantras as part of our healing offerings on a daily basis. And I definitely look at him as somebody that kind of falls within that Nada yogi tradition, that it's through his connection to his voice that he's able to access that energy. And through, through his chanting, he's uniting with that inner energy. So that's just my, general, my general approach to the yoga of sound as it's taught in the form of Nada yoga. But I can't comment on that book specifically.
Great. So someone from the audience is asking, they do the Mahakali mantra with earphones as they walk. So you said that using mantra in different settings, but is it as effective as, let's say, sitting in your meditation space or in the space that you allocated, for meditation?
That's a wonderful question. So I'm a big proponent of using mantras in activity. I usually will have like a mantra playing even when I'm working, like at the center, or when I go for walks. I usually will have some mantra playing, but that is different from a mantra meditation. Now, why is that? Well, when you are walking, when you are engaging in activity, you're actually activating specific parts of your brain that are now not able to relax and go into kind of some of the deeper brain waves associated with meditation because you're activated. You have to be active. If you were in a meditative state and walking, you would not know when you were walking in front of a car or if you were about to walk into a pole. There's areas of your brain that still have to stay alert.
Right.
In that sense, your
Yeah.
mind still has to be awake because it is an activity. So I still think it's wonderful to be playing mantras in activity. I just don't consider that to be the same as a mantra meditation. Because I think for anybody who has meditated, they have experienced those times where they say, I can't believe 30 minutes went by, or I don't know where I went. I lost complete, connection to the outside world. And that's a very important aspect of mantra meditation, because the ultimate goal of mantra meditation is ironically to lead you into silence. So that's hard to go into
Yeah.
those deeper states of relaxation, and it's hard to transcend the mind when you're having to use the mind.
That makes a lot of sense. Towards the end of the book, there is a line that I just really understood and loved so much that I just wanted to share. You say, I have also come to inhabit sound beyond body, mind, and creation in a way I couldn't have otherwise understood was possible. And I have learned that born out of silence, we are the love song of the universe. And I just thought, as we're coming to the end of our chat, I just thought that was such a poetic and touching way to end our discussion. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, I'm so happy that that line impacted you. That line came at the end of a meditation of mine, and I wasn't even near the end of the book, and I knew that this had to come near the end of the book. This is how I wanted the book to kind of close, and it summarizes a lot of things. So first of all, the fact that we're born out of silence, that the true reality of all of creation is actually nothingness, right? It's a flat reality. It is a lack of vibration. The second you have vibration, what you have is life. And that we're coming kind of from this, I don't want to say the word abyss because it's this vast ocean really of bliss. And I don't think we tend to think of something that is silent as being blissful, but we come from this vast ocean of bliss. And as the waves kind of appear on that ocean, those are the vibrations of life. I mean, that's really how we emerged, is of this reverberation from the silence as vibration. And that was how life was birthed. And the deeper and deeper I go into the Siddha tradition, and the deeper and deeper I go into my mantra practice, the one thing that is so absolutely clear to me is that life was inspired out of love. And when the Siddhas talked about the importance of love and compassion, and how devotion was the strongest spiritual practice that you could ever have, devotion to life, devotion to earth, devotion to humanity, that is your greatest spiritual practice. It's your greatest human practice, no matter what you're doing in life, if you do it with devotion. I'm just now so certain that we are born of love, that we are made of love, and anything in our life that is not love is not us. It's not our primal frequency. It's not who we really are. It's some aberrant frequency that has been introduced and just is covering us, but it's not who we are at all. at our absolute most fundamental level, we are love incarnate, and we are at our absolute best when we are expressing that love through devotion to humanity in any form possible.
That's so beautifully put. I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up this chat. On that beautiful note, on that very pure note, may we all have a beautiful and strong devotion to life. And as the Citiz said, as you quote, don't give up, but transcend.
Yes.
Which I think is the theme of tonight in many ways. So
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Kulreet, for this most amazing talk. And I know we just kind of skimmed the surface, but it was profound and interesting and gives us all so much to think about and to begin to investigate and research. We have our toolkit.
Oh, and
So,
Sonya, I want to thank you. It was such a lovely, lovely offer when you reached out to me, and your thoughts were not just on us connecting and having fun, but it was really on how can we help people at this time. So it was sparked by such, a deep sense of compassion, which is just so like you. You're always so compassionate and thinking about your community and how you could do something. So
thank you.
Thank you for this.
And this is the beginning, I hope, of many interesting chats. And I know there are some more questions, but we will get to those. And please reach out to Kulreet on her social media channels. And I look forward to talking to you again. And I look forward to all of us chanting the Mahakali mantra to dispel disease. So thank you, Kulreet. Thank you, everyone. And until next time.